We'll go ahead and get started. So thank you all for joining today. Today, we're lucky enough to be joined by Tim Crowley, the head strength and conditioning coach of Montverde Academy. I'm very excited for him to be joining today. We're going to go over in-season VBT using Perch and ultimately trying to maximize performance for high school athletes. Tim has been an integral part of some Perch education and velocity-based training education over the last few months, both Menlo Academy, and then he just published an article in Sportsmith, which if you have not read is really, really interesting. So go ahead and take a peek at that after this webinar. But Tim, thanks so much for volunteering here and thanks for joining. Without further ado, Tim, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Nika. Thanks for coming today. What I want to do is talk about in-season VBT. Using the Perch. We have been using ours we've had it now for about a year, but really during the springtime we didn't get a chance to use it too much. So really, it started early this year, and we had to do a really fast ramp up. And kind of want to share a little bit about that and put our program into some context for you before we really dig into our in-season plan. So I'm based out originally from Boston area. 12 years ago, I came down here to begin the strength and conditioning program at Montverde Academy. We are located about 17 miles just west of Orlando. There's a little aerial picture of our campus and a little snapshot of our weight room, which is about just under 5,000 square feet that we use on a regular basis. I'll give you a snapshot of our strength and conditioning program. One of the things that I've been adamant about since day one when I got here was that all teams will want access to the weight room, and strength and conditioning program will have that. And that was easy 12 years ago. Our programs and our academy, our school has grown tremendously during that time. So we're now sitting at around 30 teams, which includes high school teams, JV teams, academy teams. And what we're looking at is we're aiming for 30 to 45-minute sessions 2 to 3 times per week. We do have some teams that's still at 2 times a week for 30 minutes, and we've got to be really ruthlessly efficient with our training. And this is where I'll talk a little bit about how we're using Perch and some of the challenges we had in the beginning to get to the point where it has become streamlined and efficient. Our facility runs pretty much nonstop from Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. A lot of our teams are staggered. Their school schedule and training schedules are staggered throughout the day to maximize use of our fields and our courts and also the weight room. Our teams average between 12 to about 30 athletes, per session. Our kind of a golden number with our facilities about 24. We can handle up to 30, but things work best if we're in the 24, athlete range. We have coaches. I've got myself and 2 other full-time coaches, and we also have some interns. So we've got a lot of eyes on our athletes at all times, which I think is really important. What I've found is consistency is the key, and we're training from mid-August when we get back to school, really through the end of May when we finish school. So our goal is not only out of season, but also in season. And I think if any of you are training, high school level athletes, and you'll find that with most sports now, it's pretty much year round. So we call it perpetual in season, in that they're either in their high school season or they're playing in a club season. And a lot of our sports here have a high school season, but they're also in an established club as well. So we have many sports that are pretty much competing all year round. So not only is that help, a challenge for us, but it's also important that we are, perpetual in season. And this is where some of the concepts I'll talk about today really have come from, because I think what makes high school different, most of the athletic development is going to occur during the high school years, and it's the biggest window for strength and speed and for power. And unlike colleges, we're trying to get our athletes to colleges and beyond. So we need to have consistent development through the high school year. So we just can't train when they're out of season. We've got to try to increase our strength, our speed, our power throughout the entire year as much as we possibly can. Some of the challenges that we've run into, when we first started doing it, was obviously there's a time challenge. And so when we're implementing a new technology, there is always a challenge in how much time it's going to take away from our training. So we had done a lot of work before we put Perch in terms of learning as much as we could and studying. So when we got it, we could hit the ground running. There's a steep learning curve. And what we really try to do is implement something new once a week, multiple times a week, every day, whether that's teaching the kids how to log in, making sure everybody had access to get logged in, making sure they could understand how to get to the exercises. And I quickly found the kids were actually more versed with the technology than we were. So that made that really easy to do. And one of the other challenges we had was how's it going to affect our coaching? I was adamant that I want to make sure it did not take away from our communication or our connections with our athletes and our coaches. And we quickly found out that this really just made this way better. And I'll talk a little bit more about this as we get a little bit further into this webinar. The other big challenge we had was tech in the weight room. And so, we've got a lot of rules. I don't have many rules in the weight room, but one of them is we have no phones. And I absolutely love that because people are communicating, kids are communicating. So we didn't want to have, if we have with the iPads, we didn't want to make sure that this wasn't taking away from that. So basically we had our IT guys make sure that the only thing that could be used on the iPads was Perch, and that made it a little bit simpler in rolling it all out. Velocity-based training, we've really been doing this for a long time, and Perch allowed us to do it with a lot of our strength and barbell and jumping type activities. But for a long time, we've on a daily basis, all of our training programs, we're aiming to have time sprints, throwing. We've got a solid wall, so we do a lot of med ball throws of varying natures and weights and all kinds of stuff. And then we also use a lot of sled work. In addition, we have a hill behind our facility, so we can do a lot of hill work. In addition to that, so now we're full on velocity-based training. It really steers everything that we're doing. Perch has just really helped us make this better, and it's also helped us to be able to analyze stuff on the back end. Some of the things with our coaches and athlete buy-in, we found this was really important, really from the beginning. And obviously, if your teams are successful, that is going to help. If your athletes are not injured, it is going to help. And I think that has really been the key thing. If we can, first and foremost, our goal is to keep our athletes healthy and on the court and on the fields every day. And my philosophy is we have really good coaches, and if we can keep them, on the field and on the court every single day, they're going to be able to practice and get better. Decreasing soreness has been, especially when we talk about in season, if you want to, lose the team or not get buy-in, having an athlete sore during game day is not going to help. And so we've really, figured out some ways to really help this occur. Making sure athletes are sharp, explosive, and efficient. I think the ability to use a lot of different speeds and velocities has really helped. It's helped us to understand what we're doing and how we're doing it, but also be able to teach the athletes. It's not just about, going heavy and using as much weight as possible and having form breakdown. And so making sure technique stays the same, make sure we're increasing and monitoring the proper velocities that we want within our session, and then making sure progressing that over time has really been critical to the success of our programs. 30, 35-minute sessions that they don't cut into practice time, because many of our teams coming into the weight room and then going to practice are going to practice and coming in the weight room. So we want to maximize their practice time. And we've found if we can get 30 to 35 minutes twice a week, although not necessarily optimal, we can do the key things that we need to do to make our athletes successful. And then every rep matters. This might be the most important thing that we found or that we discovered really from day one, was then the fact that every rep was represented on the iPad in either, yellow, blue, or red in terms of where they were in relation to the zone that we had, prescribed, that it made it so much better that every rep counted to these kids. They're looking at it, they're challenging themselves, they're challenging each other. So that in and of itself, has made going into velocity-based training really successful for us. And the other thing which goes really hand in hand with that is intent matters. That we actually have staff shirts that we have that have intent matters, because once we realize that how we go about it, how they attack it, how they do every single set is going to lead to an outcome, has really shifted our training intensity and the success and the outcome of the athletes that much better. So now digging into a little bit of our in-season program, going into more specifics. Some of the objectives of our in-season program, obviously consistency is the key. Right now, we are down here in Florida. Our spring sports began a week or 10 days ago. So we are now in season with spring sports, and then several of our winter sports are still in season. So we have probably 2/3 to 3/4 of our teams are currently in season right now. So the key is consistency. And so what we're aiming for or really trying to get is if we can get 3 sessions over a 2-week period in and around games, then I think we're going to be successful in our in-season planning. The problem arises when you get a week, 10 days, or 2 weeks, and like we're heading into spring break next week. So getting as much, getting everybody in this week is important, and hopefully we can try to get some of them to do some stuff next week. But if we get a 2-week without being in the weight room, it's going to take a while to get back to where we want to go without risking them being sore or losing progress. The other objective, obviously, reduce injuries, increase resiliency, keep our athletes available, both in practice and for games. That is first and foremost the most important priority. Maintaining and improving, speed and maintaining and improving power output are the other two important things that we're looking to do. And Perch allows us to be able to look at this on the back end and then measure that and make sure we're progressing at a rate that we want to keep them, healthy and performing at the highest level. The other thing I put here is Spring Break Perch Mobile. We started using this, and we will use this next week. The ability to use Perch Mobile, we've found, has been a great adjunct because the kids are used to using the programming and the iPad. And so what it allows us to do is we can set up basic programs that they could do, whether it's at home or just to the basic gym that they may have access to. And they're used to the visual, they know how it works. And so we have them all put the app on their phone, and they're able to use that. And two things is, one is it's easy to give them the workouts and they're comfortable with it. But the other cool thing is that we can actually be able to see compliance on that. So we know who did what when they come back. So that's been very useful. We demoed that with a few teams over Thanksgiving. We used it with more teams over the Christmas break, and we will continue to use it during the spring break next week. Okay, so one of the key things we're looking for, so as we begin our in-season type program, is readiness, and this is a great one that we're using. What we do is we have all of our athletes when we set up the programs that particular day. We have the counter movement to jump. All the teams are using with the hands on the hips in a fixed position, with the exception of volleyball, because volleyball always wants to know what their vertical is. So we allow them to use an arm swing, and then we're getting a regular vertical jump for them. So we have them do 2 jumps. And what you see here on the screen is it's going to give us a snapshot here of a given day. So what happens is when they come in, we'll have an iPad out on the weight room floor, and the first thing they'll do is they'll come in after they warm up. They'll do 2 jumps. And then I'm going to quickly scan this, and you'll see over on the status column here on the right, you'll see some reds and some greens. There could also be orange too. So if it's blank, that means they're within 1 standard deviation. If they're orange, they're below 1 standard deviation. If they're red, it's 2 or more, and if they're green, it's 1 or better. So what I'm going to do is, obviously, we're going to know when the team comes in based upon their practice schedule, their game schedule, what I think we're going to need to do that day. So we'll have that planned out. But this is just going to either solidify or make me think I may need to make an adjustment. So if I think the team's going to come in ready for a good workout that day, and I look and everyone's orange or red, then we may alter the workout. And we can do it right on the spot and not wait till after the fact and go, well, we should have made a change on this. So it allows us to either confirm what we're already thinking or give us pause and think maybe we need to make an adjustment to today's workout, and we can do it right on the spot. And that may be lowering intensity, lowering volumes, cutting out sets, or whatever or cutting out entire exercises if we think that's what we need to do. It's a nice check and balance, and that has really worked well for us all year long. Maybe the most important thing that we're doing with our, using Perch for in our in-season, but really all year round, is load management. And one of the things we have is, because when we're in the weight room, we are not controlling what is going on the practice field or the court. So when the team or athletes come into us, they may come in dragging because they had a really hard workout. So by using, load management, we can alter the workouts on that day or in the plan, and even in real time, to make sure we're getting exactly what we want to get. We're getting the stress and the stimulus we want without overstepping. And we often tell the kids it's almost like Goldilocks. We make sure we're not doing too much, make sure we're not doing too little. We're just aiming for just right. This allows accumulation fatigue from daily and weekly fatigue, so we can manage our in-season programs for optimal development and for readiness for the games. It's about getting our intensity and our volume right on a daily basis. And one of the key things that I had learned, with in my study and research with philosophy-based training is that 1 RM is a moving target. And they say it can vary from day to day, plus or minus 15%. I've even seen some with say 17 and 18%. So that's could be a 30 to 35% swing. And I often joke and say we can guess better than that. So just knowing that their intensity level on a daily basis can vary widely based on, it could be sleep. They may have had an exam. They stayed up late studying, hard practice. It's, say it's early in the year. It was really hot out. Any factor can adjust that. So this is going to be by having us monitor and having them in a particular zone and making our adjustments on their workouts, in their weights in real time. Has made a really big difference, and it's allowed us to coach better. So what we're really doing is we can move up and down the racks, especially when we get our first set. So we're kind of watching where they are, and we're telling them the idea is to intent, make sure we're getting as high as we can. If we're outside that zone and we're up in the yellow, then what we really want to do is increase the weight a little bit. If we're down in the red, we're lightening the weight so we get ourselves, hopefully by set 2, we're exactly where we want to be, and then we can kind of manage it from there. And it's going to give you a quick little bit representation here, but showing our different zones and where we are. It doesn't mean if we're going to get a yellow, we're automatically adding weight. It might depend. If we're early in the first set and we're just slightly above the green zone, then we're probably going to just let them sit there, and they're going to kind of drift down into the blue over the next couple of sets that we're doing. If they're way out of it, we're going to make an adjustment. So the interesting thing that we tend to find is that it's important to let kids know that the goal is to be in the zone in the blue, but not stay there. Your intention is to try to go above that. So if every rep, every exercise is done with full intent, is to go up there. And so we really find the females athletes really like to stay there. So they're trying to like, hey, I got them all in there, even though they could go higher. One of the things we tend to find with a lot of the guys is that they may have a tendency to use too much weight, so we're down in the red. So the guys are often trying to have to bring their weights down, and a lot of the girls are trying to nudge their weights up. And again, along that, we need to educate them. They're all worried about they may get big, but the idea is you're getting strong, you're getting more resilient, you're getting more powerful. So that matters a lot. What we're trying to do here is filling, what we call filling the velocity bucket. So we're trying to fill up whatever zone that we're trying to be in. We're trying to get as many reps within that. So if we've got 5 sets of 4 or 20 total reps, how many reps can we get within there? If we're in the 15 or 16 range, that's fine, because sometimes that first rep or the first set might be a little bit higher, a little bit low, and then we need to make an adjustment. We've used in season the percent drop off feature a lot, and we'll typically use anywhere from 1 to 3 of best rep. I used to use first rep, but then I realized certain exercises, like a trap bar deadlift, which we'll use a lot, is that usually the second rep is higher than the first, because the first one you're picking up off the floor. So we'll use best rep, but we put a cap on it. So it might be, we're going to go set it up as 2% of best rep, but no more than 5 or no more than 4. So we're not getting 8, 10 reps in there. And what we found is this really allows us to kind of modify within the team. So if you have a team, say the basketball team, some people have played a lot of minutes and some that didn't play much at all. Then if we're doing, best rep with no more than 4 repetitions, the people who played or maybe more fatigued that played a lot of time in minutes, maybe doing 2 reps, maybe 3 reps. Those who didn't play will probably be getting up to 4. So it allows us to manage that load within the team without having to have separate workouts for those who played a lot of minutes, some who played a few minutes, and some who didn't play at all. So it's especially if you have a large group where you have a lot of teams, this is a really easy way to try to modify. So those who need the work get a little bit more work, and those who are fatigued are only doing what they're capable of doing on that particular day. We also use a little bit of zone drift, not so much in the in-season. We use that often a little bit in the off season more. And what we use with that is we may start like in the blue range. So if you look on that little graphic here, so if we're in the blue range and allowing them to drift into the red purposely. So we might be an example would be, we're going to have them in an accelerated zone. So we're going to want them between a 0.5 to 0.75, and they're going to start in the lower range. So they may start at 0.6 and then drift down into say 0.48, 0.45, and we're okay with that. We don't use the absolute zone rarely, I say very rarely, but we're okay in certain instances and certain times of the year if we start to drift down into that, and that's okay. So we'll use that. And what we're finding is less is more. We're really looking for quality over quantity. And that's not just in season, but pretty much all the time. Another technique we've been using in, for our in-season program, actually I learned in Spencer Arnold's Perch webinar. If you haven't seen that, highly recommend you go and look at that. I believe that was late November, early December, if I'm correct. And what that was, he talked about is to increase the velocity over time. So you kind of chart what the highest velocity was on a given day. The next workout, your goal is to try to improve that. And so one way we use that is obviously you see in the picture here, we like using our deadlift bands, and we've found using the deadlift bands has actually made our technique better. And stretch this much, we have like 6-foot athlete that probably we're looking at, we've been able to measure this. So for a 6-foot athlete, we're getting 35 pounds additional load on either side of the bar. So that's a total of 70. Obviously, the taller the athlete, it's going to be a little bit more load. And we've just found we're able to accelerate more and get more out of our lifts and our workouts by using the deadlift band. So we use those a lot when we're doing our deadlift work. And one way we've used the static load is by using with partners. And so they're basically going to go like, say 5x3 trap bar with bands. And so they're just alternating back and forth. So we're doing short rest. And the goal is to get the highest velocity we can. What they've found, and we're seeing the same thing, is over a course of 4 or 5 weeks, we may see an improvement in velocity of about 20%. And that sounds like a lot, but if we're starting at the beginning of a speed strength, so 1.0, so 1.0 and 20%, we're going to hit about 1.2. And that's still well within there. So you're not going to be going from, by using static load, going from an accelerated zone all the way through to a speed strength zone. You're probably going to stay within that zone, but you're going to progress further within it. It's a really easy way to set up your room. It's a really easy way for the athletes to set up whatever the weights are. And sometimes using suggested load and kind of hitting that right away and letting them go. And once they have the weight that you want to use, they're going to stay with that for the period of time, whether it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or wherever your block is. And the goal there is each and every day you're attempting to go a little bit faster. And again, and here's our intent once again. One thing that I've learned this year is I was a big fan in the past, again, especially when we have short time frames, is using a lot of 3 sets of 5, but I have now become a big fan of 5 sets of 3. And the reason there is that it doesn't take any more time. It's just increasing the quality. And we're able to hit higher velocities consistently as opposed to having it drift down. Because what we're seeing is that if we're doing high intensity work or high quality work, then after about 3 repetitions, we're seeing a significant drop off in velocity. So we started staying with 3s. We were able to get more, and we're just adding more sets. So it really doesn't add anything more to the workout time wise or rep wise. But we're getting better results and getting more of what we're trying to achieve in our workout. Other possibilities we're starting to experiment with is 4x4, 3x6. We have it, and I've used 3x6 in season. And the way we would use that is if we're doing so in sets, if we say we're doing a lower body trap bar or single leg squat, safety bar split squat, we may go sets 1 through 3 and then pair that with, say, an upper body push, and then sets 4 through 6 in upper body pull. So that would be the bulk of our workout, especially if we're in season. And again, we can make that more of a strength emphasis. We can make it more of a speed dynamic or power emphasis. The 8x3s we haven't got to. I'm feeling is that's probably more of an out of season than it is in season, but that is something we will be experimenting with a little bit later this spring. Now digging a little bit more into our actual in season workouts. So we try to break these up into strength days and dynamic days or speed days. And so the emphasis is going to be strength maintenance, or it's going to be speed and power. And so in the first half of the season, we're going to work on maintaining our strength or even enhancing it slightly. Basically staying in an accelerated strength zone, 0.5 to 0.75 meters per second. And then our speed strength is going to be strength speed being 0.75 to 0.1. So that will be the emphasis. And not all of the exercises that we're doing on those particular days are going to be in those zones, but our key exercises, our main exercises are going to be there. The second half of the season, we're still going to be maintaining strength, but we're going to be looking at the higher end of the accelerated zone. So say at 0.6 to 0.75. And then we're going to shift a little bit higher into a speed strength, which is 1.1 to 1.3 to a higher velocity. Once we get to the playoffs, or we're in that last few weeks of the season toward the playoffs, we're going to look at tapering down a little bit, maintaining intensity, but decreasing our volume. And then doing a little bit more or putting a little bit more emphasis in the speed strength zone to maintain our power. Because one of the things we want to look at is training residuals. And I think these numbers are really high. I mean, it's like for maximal strength, it says you can maintain it up to 30 days. I'm not sure I'd want to go 30 days, but if you look at, what I said a little bit earlier, we're looking at this 2 week window. And I need to make sure we're getting at least one strength day every 14 days or so. That is our goal. And you'll see that the power endurance, and especially speed is going to be only maintained for about 5 days. That is why we want to make sure we're sprinting or doing something at very high speeds on a daily basis. And so our emphasis on power endurance. So we want to make sure that if we're training those, 3 days out of every 2 weeks, we're going to make sure that at least one of those is a strength day. And then we have two dynamic days or speed days, but depends on where they fall. If it's game day -1 or game day -2, we're going to default into our speed and power. Hopefully we're going to have another day outside of that window. So 3 days out from a game or so where we can do a strength maintenance. If we have a day where, say we're playing, say softball, they've got a game on Tuesday and they get them on Thursday and we're going to lift on Wednesday, we're going to make that a dynamic day, because if we're going heavier on that day, we're more inclined to make them a little bit sore. So we'll maintain and go with our power and our speed to maintain that and reduce the chance of having anything negative. So drilling down a little bit more into each of the days. Here's our strength days. Again, we've got we're staying with our accelerated zone. We're going to keep our volume per exercise. We're probably going to have 3 to 4 key exercises, all being 8 to 12 reps per. And again, we'll divvy up whether it's 4x3, 5x3 type of setup in terms of sets and reps. I'm going to have at least one every 2 weeks because of that 30-day residual to maintain that. And then on our dynamic days, we're aiming for a lower volume. Reps are going to be in the 2 to 4 range. We're going to kind of live in that strength, speed, strength zones. We'll use a lot of band. This is where we start to play with and use a lot of band resistance. And I'll show a slide in a second on how we're kind of playing with that. Again, there's our residuals for our power and our speed. And then that first half of the season, we're kind of going with our strength speed a little bit slower to 0.75 to 1.0. And then as the season progresses, we're defaulting and moving more into a higher speed zone. Some of the ways we do some of our setups for our bands, we got our, when basically in an accelerated zone, what we found is we start moving, especially I'm using here the safety bar split squat, especially we have hand supported, is that when we start to get to the upper side of the accelerated zone, what we're having is we have to put a light band on there because the bar can often pop off the athlete's shoulders. So we don't need a lot of resistance there. As we go into strength speed, we're increasing our band resistance and lowering the weight a little bit. That way we can accelerate a little bit further into the exercise. And then with our speed strength, we can be double banding or adding more band tension and then less weight on the bar. So we may be, with the speed strength, we're probably looking somewhere around 50% of the resistance coming from the band, 50% coming from the load of the bar and the plates. On the strength speed side, it's probably a little bit more, like 65% from the band, and then 35% from the bar, the weights. As we get a little bit into, we got game day -1 and game day -2. And what I did was these are actual workouts I pulled, so I didn't kind of make these up. These are ones we actually used. This is one from an early season with basketball. And what you'll see is, and this is a 40-minute workout. And so we've got our ankle mobility, we've got mini band work, we've got a counter movement jump. That's for our readiness. And then we're doing split jerks At a high velocity, we get 2.3 or higher. So that's fairly light, really explosive. And then we're going to go with our trap bar deadlift with the band, and we're in an accelerated zone. And then we're pairing that with a dumbbell chest press. And then you'll see we've got a cable row, and then our split squat. And you'll see the split squat without an accelerative zone because of the deadlift being at a higher zone. So we want to make sure we got a little bit of strength. In this case, we're looking for a little bit of strength maintenance and a little bit of strength speed. And then we finish the workout up. We just got some, med ball throw. We've got cable core, and we've got a suitcase carry. So this is a 40-minute workout, and this was done. This was a game day -1. That was an early season game. And then we've got game day lift. And one of the situations that we often have is because we've got so many teams in our schedule that we can't alter. So sometimes if a team has a game on a Wednesday or a match on a Wednesday, we can't say, well, let's shift that to Tuesday or Thursday, because oftentimes it's fixed and there's a domino effect when we start to change that. So this is a volleyball workout. Was during the fall. That was a game day. There was a match day, and they come in and lift just before lunch, and so they're ready around noontime. And they had a match that was at 4 o'clock that afternoon. Again, one of the times I really like to continue, make sure we're doing a lot of in-season work, because one, we're keeping the habit and we're consistent with their time frames and consistent hitting the weight room. And so the more we do that, the more it's not an issue for the athletes. And our goal is to make sure not only is that they feel good when they go to the match. And so if we hit this right, once they go to the match that afternoon, they're not going to feel sleepy, tired, lethargic. They're going to feel ready. Their nervous system is fired up and they're ready to go. And so here we just do a basic dynamic warm-up with mobility for about 5 minutes, mini band work. And then we're doing our counter movement jump. Again, always tracking that. And it's not going to impact this workout here, but we do want to see this for tracking over the long term, so we have our an accurate readiness score. And then I'm going to do an empty trap bar jump 3x3. You'll see that speed's a little bit higher. And then going to pair that with a med ball push, the trap bar deadlift with bands, and again, accelerated zone velocity with a half kneel cable row. And then we've got our foot and ankle using our toe pros, and we got external rotation, and then we got our band jumps. Those are really ankle pops, just kind of get a little bit snap in the legs. One thing, which is a great feature, we don't use this a lot, but Perch has a great leaderboard, and there's times when it's really good to roll this out when you want to add a little competition. We don't do it with a lot of key heavy lifts. We will do it with jumps. Jumps are a great way of doing it. And some of our ballistic type movements, and you can put a cap on it. So in other words, if we're doing, say, a split squat, a split jerk, I want to see who's producing the most amount of power, the highest velocity. We may say it's got to be a threshold of a certain amount of weight. But this is kind of fun for athletes. It gives them a chance to compete with each other and see who's the best. And again, you're just getting a little bit more intent out of them. You just got to use this sparingly and make sure that they're doing it correctly. Helps to motivate the athletes. It also opens up for education. The athlete will come and say, "Oh, how do I make this better?" And you can then educate them on technique and strength and speed and sometimes it's just like showing up and giving effort when they come in. Again, we can set limits on this too, so it's a great tool. We don't use it all the time. We just use it, and it's in our toolbox so we can bring it out when necessary. So with some of the insights from VBT that I have learned in this past year, the first one is that intent matters. I think it's really important that we learned this from day one, that if the athletes come in and they give us their best effort, good things are going to happen. And I think it's a great lesson for them. It's a bit of instills a bit of discipline. And also they know there's some science and thought process behind designing the workouts. It enhances the coaching. And that was one of my big things when we first started this project was, is this going to make us better coaches, or is it going to take away from our coaching? Our connection with the athletes is enhance it tremendously. I love walking up and down, giving coaching points and also making sure we're making the adjustments, up, increasing the weight, decreasing the weight, telling athletes, when they're doing stuff really well, that has really helped in terms of education. It's also helped education in the coaches, because a lot of coaches, their theories or the way they're thinking about training, especially in the weight room, might revolve around what they did 20 or 30 years ago. And so really updating them on how this is going to help their athletes, how it's going to help them attract new athletes, how it's going to help keep the athletes on the courts. And that's or the field is going to be a big, big difference. Optimal loading and progressions. This has really opened my eyes in terms of how we're going to optimally load our athletes. And so we're trying to hit it and get it right. We're learning this each and every day. We're fortunate enough to have, we probably have a couple thousand workouts per week. Our athletes, so our learning curve is very steep. We're always trying to try out new techniques and new plans and ways of making it better. And the other thing, which I wanted to put a picture here, some of the classics. Hopefully, if you haven't read these books, highly recommended. But for me, it's been going. I'm rereading them with new interest because a lot of them talked about velocity and all these different things. And before that was more of a concept, and now what it is I'm learning it again, and to be able to apply those things, which realizes they were doing some really cool stuff even back in the 70s and the 80s without all the technology we have now. So with this technology we have now, we can go back and learn and relearn and do things so much better. Nika mentioned before, here's my article. It came out a couple of weeks ago on readiness and pregame preparation on Sportsmith. So you can look that up. It goes a little bit more, it goes in depth in some of the stuff we were already talking about. And so please give a chance to check that out. And if you have any questions, let's let them go.